The NFL draft is here. We don't know where the Denver Broncos are going, but we do know they picked up the fifth-year option of cornerback Patrick Surtain. We'll tell you why that's a great move here on today's brand new episode, Locked on Broncos.
You are Locked on Broncos, your daily Denver Broncos podcast. Part of the Locked on Podcast Network, your team every day.
What's up, Broncos Country? Welcome into a brand new episode of Locked on Broncos, your daily Denver Broncos podcast, part of the Locked on Podcast Network, your team every day. Thank you so much once again to all the everydayers out there in Broncos Country. Thanks so much for tuning in and making us your first listen of the day every single day. Just a reminder, you can get Locked on Broncos every single day all year long for free on YouTube or wherever you get your podcast. So make sure you subscribe or you follow so you never miss out on what's going on with your favorite team. It's a big day here today as the 2024 NFL Draft is officially here. I'm Cody Roark, Broncos reporter for Mile High Sports, joined alongside, as always, by Sayre Bedinger, site expert, predominantlyorange.com. I mean, what more needs to be said here, Sayre? The moment we've been waiting for since the season really ended. We kind of look ahead once the Broncos season ends to free agency, but we also glance ahead toward the NFL Draft. And that day, my friend, is officially here. There's a lot of buzz, a lot of hype. We don't know where the Broncos are going. We don't know what they're going to do. Before we dive into the draft, we do know something that should give Broncos Country a little bit of excitement. The Broncos picked up Patrick Surtain's fifth-year option. So now I think we have to analyze this as well. It is draft day. They picked up his fifth-year option. What does this mean for the team? And does it mean that a trade of him is off the table on draft night?
Well, yeah, you can't help but wonder, Cody. I have this here for the folks on YouTube. I'm going to bust this out on the show for the first time here. So, I mean, you see this here, the Pat Surtain jersey, the brand new Denver Broncos jersey. But look, I kept the tags on, okay? Because I don't know what's going to happen during the NFL draft. We have no idea what's going to happen. And look, I think it would be a huge shock if the Broncos did make a trade all the way up to, let's say, 4th overall involving PS2 at this point. But look, if you got a jersey like me, keep the tags on until Friday morning at least and just wait and see what happens there. But I think as of tonight, Cody, I think we'll be able to rock our PS2 jerseys safely. Hopefully, as you've mentioned, in the future, there could be an extension on the horizon. But as of right now, I don't think the fifth-year option really means anything. I think people want it to mean that he's not going anywhere. They want it to mean that they won't use him in a trade up. But I don't know. You kind of convinced me that maybe the fifth-year option as of right now is just procedural. It's just something that the Broncos are doing because, hey, it's a no-brainer anyway. We'll find out after the first night of the NFL draft whether or not he's really going to be staying in Denver.
Well, and I can tell you this. I know the Broncos organization, they really love PS2, and I don't think that they would necessarily part ways. Look, we've seen some players from the 2021 class already get extended around the National Football League when we're talking about Penei Sewell being one of them from the Detroit Lions. I think Patrick Surtain is in line for a contract extension in which, look, I think it's going to entirely reset the cornerback market. Obviously, with the fifth-year option being picked up, he will make $19.8 million in 2025. Here in 2024, he's going to make $3.5 million. So, I mean, it's a no-brainer for Denver to pick him up. I don't think that George Paton or Sean Payton, I can tell you this, just knowing, and if we look at history from Sean, right? Sean, what did he do? What is one player that he's coached over the course of his career who's a defensive back who he has consistently just raved about, has brought up, had a same first-round grade as, Patrick Mahomes, Marshawn Lattimore. Patrick Surtain's different. Look, Marshawn Lattimore's a great cornerback, but Patrick Surtain in today's NFL is very, very special. I see Sean recognizing that. Look, I don't want to read too much into things, right? But when I'm at practice, I watch interactions and I watch how Sean and Pat interact with one another. I guarantee you, I think that Pat is in the long-term plans here of the Broncos. I know specifically that Pat wants to stay in Denver and he loves it here in Broncos country. So the hope is that after tonight's NFL draft, you, Sayre, and anybody else who bought a PS2 jersey can rip that tag right off. And, Denver can move forward here. But here's what I also do expect. Like when we talk about Pat's fifth-year option, it being picked up, here's what Broncos country should expect, right, in terms of a contract extension. This isn't something I don't think is going to happen after 2024. I think this is something that more than likely will come up during the 2024 NFL season, where we will see that breaking news notification, the Broncos making Patrick Surtain the highest paid cornerback in NFL history. That is something I think Broncos fans should expect during the season, not after.
I think so too, Cody. And you've heard George Paton. I'd have to go back and read the transcripts to be certain about this. But every time that you hear this topic get brought up, which isn't a ton lately, everybody's talking about the draft, things like that. But when it has been brought up, hasn't it been interesting to hear George Paton mention that they believe Pat is one of the best cornerbacks in the NFL? I was listening to a Pro Football Talk episode with Mike Florio and Chris Sims lately, Cody, where they were talking about how the Vikings and their general manager Kwesi Adolfo-Mensah mentioned that Justin Jefferson to them is one of the best non-quarterbacks in the NFL. And you got to understand there's a huge difference in the price of those two things right there. When you're talking about, we're saying Pat is the best corner in the NFL, or one of the best corners in the NFL, and you're saying Justin Jefferson is one of the best non-quarterbacks in the NFL. Those are two very different price tags when you're talking about a player and a contract extension. If the Broncos were to come out and say, man, Pat, he's one of the best non-quarterbacks in the NFL, they would be not only getting ready to reset the cornerback market, but getting ready to pay Pat Surtain borderline quarterback money. So I hope that's not confusing the way that I presented it. I thought it was a really good point about Justin Jefferson. They're talking about him being, I mean, screw 30 million a year. This guy might go up to 35 million, 40.
Oh, man.
So when you're talking about best non-quarterbacks, you're comparing to a different range of price tags. What is Joey Bosa getting, or Nick Bosa getting paid? What is, all these other guys getting paid? That's where I think this discussion about Pat Surtain, like you said, could be during the 2024 season, could be during this offseason. And to think the cap hit right now on this 5th-year option is over 19 million next year. The Broncos could sign an extension with Pat Surtain this offseason and not only get a favorable cap hit this year, but get a favorable cap hit the next 2 years, depending on how long they extend him, because they can flip that 5th-year option into like a guaranteed bonus or part of a guaranteed bonus. So the structure of this is going to help the team long-term. If you can get this long-term deal done, I think the Broncos can build something really special over the next couple years.
Oh, and I also go back to it as well, hearing George and Sean talk about the importance of like the non-quarterback positions that have value. Like they talked about it specifically, like cornerback and edge. They have very high value in today's NFL. I don't see Sean or George parting ways with that in any way, shape, or form, especially when you already have a multitude of questions at the cornerback position opposite of Pat in the first place. So I think Broncos country, more than likely, fingers crossed, after tonight's NFL draft, we'll figure out a little bit more if Patrick Surtain is safe. He should be safe, in my opinion. I have no inclination that anything's going to happen with him. I know that the Broncos like him. I know Sean Payton likes him. George Paton likes him. Is that enough? Well, it depends on what the strategy is going to be here for the NFL draft tonight when the Broncos are on the clock here. And so now we're going to start diving into some draft conversation, folks, because you know what? We always wait for the experts' final mock drafts. Usually releases day of the draft or the day before the draft. Daniel Jeremiah, one of the most trusted voices in all of the NFL, has the Broncos in a very, very interesting scenario that we're actually in favor of in terms of trading down. We'll analyze what Daniel Jeremiah had to say here on today's brand new episode, Locked On Broncos. Today's Locked On Broncos podcast is brought to you by our friends over there at Monopoly Go. And we've all been there before, either as a player or as a fan. It's halftime and the scoreboard, it's not looking good. You're feeling low. You're not sure how you or your team can pull out a win. That's when you dig deep. You lift your head up and you say to yourself, time to get back in the game, pull off some bank heists, and take as much of my friend's money as I possibly can. That's right. The smash hit mobile game Monopoly Go lets you compete with your friends to get the most riches in the biggest empire. It's the Monopoly you love, but on your phone anytime with tons of new twists, including leaderboards to compare your progress to your buddies. There's so much to do where you can play on countless dynamic Monopoly boards. You can make your friends bankrupt by smashing their landmarks with a wrecking ball, and you can charge other players rent for your iconic properties. You can even work with your friends to crack open community chests and in tournaments to get extra rewards and climb the leaderboard. So get back out there, put on your game face, and download Monopoly Go, now free on the App Store or Google Play. Today's Locked On Broncos podcast is also brought to you by our friends over there at FanDuel Sportsbook. And as you all know, FanDuel is America's #1 sportsbook, and it is playoff time. The NBA and the NHL playoffs, they're ongoing. Baseball season just started up and they're in full swing, and FanDuel is your place to bet on every single game. The Denver Nuggets have 2 straight road games against the Los Angeles Lakers. Are they going to come out ahead in game 3? If you have confidence they're going to go up 3-0 and you want to choose the Nuggets on the money line, well, you can do that with FanDuel Sportsbook, because right now new customers get $150 in bonus bets guaranteed. That's $150 win or lose. Bet on everything from slap shots to home runs to slam dunks, three-point shots, all on an app that's safe, secure, and most of all, it's super easy to use. So what are you waiting for? Visit FanDuel.com/lockedon and make your first bet an automatic win. FanDuel is America's #1 sportsbook.
The experts are saying Bo Nix will be the next quarterback of the Denver Broncos. Daniel Jeremiah of NFL Network dropped his final mock draft and has the Broncos doing what maybe Cody and I believe to be the ideal scenario during the 2024 NFL draft. We're going to break that down on today's episode of Locked On Broncos, but want to say thank you to every single one of you that makes Locked On Broncos your first listen of the day every single day right here on the Locked On Podcast Network, where free and available everywhere that you get your podcasts. And if you watch on YouTube, you might just see the quick cameo by the Pat Surtain jersey. You never know, maybe he'll be hanging up behind me soon. So go ahead and subscribe on YouTube as well. But Cody, let's talk about Daniel Jeremiah, who I tweeted this out as I was watching the hour-long special that the NFL Network does now to reveal his mock draft. I love Mel Kiper Jr. He's the reason that I fell in love with the NFL draft. But I think Daniel Jeremiah, he's the best NFL draft analyst ever that I've seen. And he does such a great job. He's always accurate with his mock drafts, at least as far as accurate as you can be. And look, he's got the Broncos taking a path that you and I explored on a recent mock draft. Actually, I think it was my most recent mock draft that I did on Locked On Broncos on Monday there, where we trade down with the Philadelphia Eagles. Let's break down DJ's final mock draft where he's got the Broncos moving down.
Well, in this scenario, Daniel Jeremiah, I agree with you. The only thing I don't like about DJ, he's the voice of the Los Angeles Chargers there. So, I mean, if we're nitpicking here, but when it comes to the draft process and him going in depth, like, he is one of the best to ever do it here. But in Daniel Jeremiah's mock draft scenario, the Broncos, they get picks number 22, they get pick number 50, and a 5th-round pick from the Eagles to move down, which allows the Eagles to move up to the 12th spot there overall. Now, I think a lot of this, when you factor into consideration here, okay, well, if Denver's coming away here with Bo Nix, then that must mean that they didn't feel like they had the best chances or odds of getting a guy like J.J. McCarthy. So in your opinion here, Sayre, like, your initial thoughts on how Daniel Jeremiah's overall thought process went into this for Denver specifically? Because look, I think it's good for Denver. They get a quarterback, they get some more premier capital when you talk about the 50th pick, and then you get an additional 5th-round pick. Like, Denver's got ammunition, and look, they can use that 5th-round pick as well to combine with some of the other back-end picks there to move up into round 4, or maybe use those to move up into round 3. Like, it just depends on where Denver's at. And I will note, I felt like it was interesting when we heard initially, I think it was at the NFL Scouting Combine, George Payton, and he was asked a question about the front end part of the talent of this year's NFL draft compared to the back end. And I think a lot of it was, the highlight is that this is a very front end heavy NFL draft cycle versus back end talent on the, toward the end of the draft. So, like, is Denver planning on keeping a lot of these back end picks, or are they looking to try to strike gold with premier? This situation right here gives them ammunition to come away with a ton of talented players, more than likely at positions of need as well.
It does. I mean, that scenario that was presented by him, it involved Jared Verse still being available there at 22. I think Jared Verse in his mock draft went 26 to the Bucks. So let's just say, hey, the Broncos don't believe that the back half of this draft is going to be great, and they get that extra 2nd-round pick, and they say, look, we feel like Jared Verse could be a top flight player off the edge for us. We're going to take him here. Then we're going to take 50 and 76 and one of those other later picks, and we're going to move back in for Bo Nix. Because if the Broncos believe that he's going to fall in the 1st round, the question becomes, then how far back can you go, and how much can you play the game, right? How much can you flirt with disaster, so to speak? If he's your target, and let's say 5 other quarterbacks have already come off the board, Are you afraid of a situation happening like what happened with, and I hate to bring this up, but Paxton Lynch, where remember it was the Broncos, it was the Chiefs, it was the Cowboys, and they were all vying for this one quarterback, and then the Broncos made it happen, and they had egg on their face later, but all these other teams wanted Paxton Lynch at the time. So it's like, how much do you play the game? Do you trade down from 12? If you love Bo Nix as your future starter, I think trading down will give us a great indication, Cody, of just how comfortable Sean Payton really is with maybe Zach Wilson being his starter potentially in 2024.
I was also going to say, could you imagine if the Chiefs had taken Paxton Lynch rather than Patrick Mahomes? You know, like maybe if Paxton Lynch is the Chiefs quarterback, Patrick Mahomes goes to the New Orleans Saints, and all of a sudden the conversation is very different. Denver doesn't have Sean Payton as the head coach. Like, just imagine, like, I imagine there's so many scenarios based on the NFL draft alone, where if you did like one of those Disney what if series, looking back like in Marvel, there's so many different scenarios that could have played out here for the Denver Broncos. Like, would Denver have ended up with Dak Prescott, you know, in a situation in the NFL draft that year, or like Trevor Siemian, or like would a Brock Osweiler have picked up his phone and stayed? Like, I wish we could really explore something like that. There's got to be some sort of alternate universe where we can create some of the stuff going on here. But I felt like that is a fascinating angle here. I'm with you there on the standpoint that if you believe that Bo Nix is the guy, and look, let's say he is there at 22 and you believe he's the guy, there's nothing wrong with taking him at 22. It's not an indictment on him in any way, shape, or form. I also think that getting back in premier capital allows you to build this team essentially around him, because I think we get so caught up in what has happened the last couple of years with the whole Russell Wilson trade, the lack of first-round picks, right? How has this team built in the draft the last couple of years? Well, you look at 2022 and 2023, Denver hasn't really been able to draft starters, essentially, like in mind, like this guy's going to be a day one starter. They've like, hey, this guy's going to factor into the rotation primarily, and that starts with Marvin Mims. That started with guys like Nick Bonito, and now Nick is in an opportunity as well where I think eventually he is going to be the starting outside linebacker here for Denver. But Denver has not been in a position as of late to draft starters that can be homegrown guys for a long time. Like now you're just drafting guys here in 2022, 2023. You're hoping develop that can be homegrown guys for you. Now here in 2024, it's a little bit different. You get a first-round pick here. Denver's obviously going to be going into next year's free agency cycle with potentially up to $100 million in salary cap space, and all of their draft picks, as we know so far, in 2025. So for me, Denver's actually in a great position when you talk about structure, that they can build a team around a young quarterback right now and in the next 2 to 3 years, where I think that Denver can still be competitive. I think they can be competitive this year. There's going to be a lot of things that have to happen there, but I think that Denver's in actually a better spot than I think most people imagined that they would be before the offseason even began.
You know how much I love to drop a good Batman quote on this show, Cody, but the night is always darkest before the dawn, isn't it? I mean, the dawn is the 2024 NFL draft, and things right now in Broncos country seem bleak. Everybody's clowning them for the jerseys. Everybody's clowning the roster. Nobody thinks that they have any shot at getting a good quarterback. Well, guess what? We're going to see what happens on Thursday night when Sean Payton does his thing. And to me, the most shocking aspect of these mock draft scenarios that I keep on seeing, Cody, I've seen 3 of them from 3 very respected people: Dane Brugler, Peter Schrager, Daniel Jeremiah. All of these people, none of these people seem to believe that Sean's going to go up and get a quarterback, which I think is fascinating. I mean, based on everything that we've been hearing and observing, and I don't know, it's just maybe they won't. Maybe we'll see them trade down and not be aggressive. But look, the night is darkest before the dawn here. What are the Broncos going to do? I agree with you. They're in a good spot to bring in a young quarterback behind that offensive line and then build around him into the future.
Somebody called us the Russell Wilson podcast, like version of a podcast, because we come on here and we talk about how to build the team, right? I don't think like we're overly positive. I also don't think that we're overly negative. I feel like we do a pretty good job of staying in the middle, because look, what's the point? Like, what's the point of even covering sports, or even like for fans listening, what's the point of even being a fan of the team if everything is going to be negative all the time? Like, I believe in looking at things for what they are, both sides. And I think you and I do a really good job of that. Like when a move happens, okay, what could be the pros of this move? What could be the cons of this move without having like a super defining negative stamp on it? I feel like we just have to let things play out. And look, Broncos country, the product that since Super Bowl 50 has been embarrassing. It's been unacceptable. But we can't just go into every single year thinking, okay, hey, because of this last year, this is going to be terrible forever. Like, you got to embrace every new year with a new perspective. And we're always in the wait and see approach. And I think Broncos country, if you embrace the wait and see approach, you can be cautiously optimistic. I mean, it's perfectly fine. But I just don't understand the whole be negative at all costs. Like, for us, like, people want us to be negative. They want us to bag and bash every move that this team makes. But the reality is we don't know how it's going to play out. We are in the wait and see business here. That's our jobs here. So I feel like we should highlight that. We'll see what the reaction is after the Broncos announce their draft pick here on tonight's NFL Draft Extravaganza, 6:00 p.m. Mountain Time. You can expect an emergency episode of Locked On Broncos the moment that Denver makes their pick. We'll react to it. We'll break it all down. It'll be here on Locked On Broncos. There's one more mock draft that we're going to get to from a well-trusted expert in that field. Where does Peter Schrager have the Denver Broncos going? Does he have them staying put at 12? Does he have them trading up for the quarterback? Well, we'll break it all down here on today's brand new episode, Locked On Broncos. Today's Locked On Broncos podcast is brought to you by our friends over there at LinkedIn Jobs. And when you're hiring for your small business, you want to find quality professionals that are right for the role. That's why you have to check out LinkedIn Jobs. LinkedIn Jobs has the tools to help you find the right professionals for your team faster and, more importantly, for free. LinkedIn isn't just a job board. LinkedIn helps you hire professionals that you can't find anywhere else, even those who aren't actively searching for a new job, but might be open to the perfect role. In a given month, over 70% of LinkedIn users don't visit other leading job sites. So if you're not looking on LinkedIn, you're looking in the wrong place. On LinkedIn, 86% of small businesses get a qualified candidate within 24 hours. Hire professionals like a professional on LinkedIn. And LinkedIn knows that small businesses are wearing so many hats and might not have the time or the resources to hire. LinkedIn is constantly finding ways to make the process easier. They even just launched a feature that helps you write job descriptions, making the process even easier and quicker. 2.5 million small businesses use LinkedIn for hiring. So post your job for free at linkedin.com/lockedonnfl. That's linkedin.com/lockedonnfl to post your job for free. Terms and conditions apply. As we jump into the fourth quarter on today's episode of Locked On Broncos, we'll dive deep into Peter Schrager's mock draft that has the Denver Broncos taking a quarterback. Where do they have them going there? Obviously, just want to say thank you so much real quick to everybody in Broncos country for tuning in, making us your first listen of the day every single day. Just a reminder, you can get Locked On Broncos for free on YouTube or wherever you get your podcasts. We appreciate you so much taking us with you wherever you go for all your Broncos news, content coverage, and analysis every single day all year long. All right, Sayre. P. Schrags, obviously, a guy that I respect a ton, really puts in a lot of work, releases his mock draft the day of the NFL draft festivities. We know from his time at Fox that there's a connection there. Sean Payton had a chance to work with Peter Schrager in the media world a little bit. And I think even when Sean was going through the head coaching process where he's going to do interviews, remember, like, he sat up there with Peter Schrager explaining, like, this is what this looks like. This is what I'm looking for, like, in my next situation to go into as a coach. So there is a lot of relationship equity between P. Schrags and Sean Payton. Now, obviously, Sean's not going to be out there telling anybody what his plan is, but you can maybe get a general vibe like, hey, we may be leaning this direction. Peter Schrager, based on maybe having conversations with Sean Payton, maybe having conversations with other teams in front of the Broncos, behind the Broncos, has outlined his NFL draft, mock draft kind of prediction here, which has the Broncos staying at 12th overall and taking Bo Nix out of Oregon. So once again, you got Daniel Jeremiah and now Peter Schrager going with back-to-back picks there in terms of Bo Nix.
Yeah, and I'm going to put on the tinfoil hat here for a second, Cody, just because we know that Peter Schrager does have a relationship with Sean Payton. They worked together. They're very close. And Peter still communicates with Sean Payton regularly. We know Sean Payton's not going to be giving Peter Schrager the NFL draft secrets, right? He's not going to sit there and say, hey, yeah, we're taking Bo Nix, put him at number 12. But you can't help but wonder if Sean maybe gave Peter a little nugget to say, here's what I want you to put in your mock drafts, because this is what we want people to think. All right, here's what I want you to say on the NFL Network, because this is what I want people to think. That stuff does. Teams have TVs on all throughout the day. They are listening to stuff. They're trying to cross-reference what they're hearing from others. I think it's fascinating that he has the Broncos staying at 12 and taking Bo Nix. Not that I don't think that's possible to happen, Cody, but just the more you hear about Bo Nix and his stock and Schrager's analysis of the pick, it makes sense, right? I mean, he's talking about like, well, there's fans of Bo Nix in that building there. And he said on NFL Network later, he's like, I know there's like the Broncos like JJ McCarthy, maybe as much as the Minnesota Vikings. And so there's rumors that are out there. I feel like the pendulum is swinging to where like the Broncos they have everybody where they want them in terms of, hey, we either want you to say that we want Bo Nix because we really do, and we just want to confuse everybody to think like, hey, are they really going to take Bo Nix? What are they? It's almost like a reverse psychology type of thing. Like the Broncos obviously want people to know that they want Bo Nix. It was leaked just recently that they flew to Eugene to do a private workout with him. And we saw, remember how upset George Payton was when it leaked from Sean Payton himself that the Broncos did a private workout with JJ McCarthy. So why do the Broncos want everybody going Bo Nix in their mock draft? Why do they want everybody, talking about Bo Nix? The pendulum swinging that way. That to me is the most fascinating.
Could be that they have interest in him. Could be that they're trying to deflect. Find out on the latest episode of Dragon Ball Z, folks. I mean, this is where I think things get very exciting because this is, I say more so on draft day, which is here today, that you see a lot of different smoke screens coming in and out. Remember a couple years ago, the smoke screen that we all saw with the Broncos saying, oh my gosh, like the Broncos interested in trading for Aaron Rodgers. Like that nugget had dropped during the draft. And all of a sudden we're sitting there like, wait, what's going on with this team? Like, we have no idea where Denver is at, what they plan to do. And I remember that was a huge part of the conversation as Denver was creeping up towards the 9th overall pick, which obviously ended up being Patrick Surtain. But, I think for me, you mentioned there, like if the Vikings like JJ McCarthy as much as the Broncos, this is where Denver's at a disadvantage, right? Because Minnesota's got 2 first-round picks in this year's NFL draft. They have more ammunition to be able to leapfrog anybody to get up to a spot that they want to make sure that they can get their guy, which – look, it's smart by Minnesota. It's smart by Minnesota to be in that position. So that means that if Denver really wanted J.J. McCarthy, that he was the guy, that he's the landscape guy, it may require even more. But, I mean, if you're the Arizona Cardinals, you're Monty Ossenfort, and you're saying, hey, I'm getting a call from Minnesota. They're going to give us their back-end first-round pick. We're going to swap as well, and they're going to maybe throw in additional capital. Like, that seems more appeasing. Denver, on the other hand, would more than likely have to include their swapping with 12 here this year, a first rounder next year, and maybe a player or two, like which could be Cortland Sutton, could be maybe Cortland Sutton and Garrett Bowles. I don't think, like there's just different options that Denver could do there, but it would require them to give up so much more than what Minnesota would have to give up. And I think that is where Denver is at a disadvantage when you talk about who you want to get, the game and how you want to do it as well. That to me, I think is the most interesting angle here. And not to mention, look, Denver's got a division rival ahead of them. Look, they got a division rival right behind them that wants to jump up and maybe move up in the NFL draft with the Raiders. So this is all about calculation. And I think for George and Sean, the one thing I'm excited to see here, they're going to be sitting there. They're going to be watching. Okay, first pick goes, we expect Caleb Williams. Second pick goes, we expect that to be Drake May potentially, or Jaden Daniels. And then Drake May potentially to the Patriots at number 3. Like could be any of those two guys there. I just, part of me is wondering, what is that going to do? Like when those dominoes fall there, picks 1, 2, 3, everyone's going to be looking at, okay, the Arizona Cardinals are on the clock. Are they going to trade back? Or are they going to pick Marvin Harrison Jr. with the 4th overall pick? Like that's where we're sitting at right now, looking at this NFL draft. And Denver has no choice but to sit and be patient tonight. And I think that right there is going to be very interesting. We'll see how aggressive and calculated George and Sean will really be if that is the situation.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to finding out because the more I think about it, Cody, the more I'm convinced that, okay, quarterbacks go 1, 2, 3. We're pretty set on that. Maybe one of these teams that we're talking about jumps up to the Patriots pick at 3, and then the Patriots try to maneuver for JJ. That would throw a wrench in everything. But let's just say things go chalk 1, 2, 3. Caleb Williams, Jaden Daniels, Drake May. The Cardinals at 4, they're set on picking Marvin Harrison Jr. We're not trading that pick. We're taking Marvin. We committed to Kyler Murray. We're going to get him the best possible player that we can. The Chargers at 5. You know what's interesting is that the JC Latham train has taken off the station. The Chargers taking JC Latham at 5. It seems like a legit thing. If Daniel Jeremiah says it, like you said, he's the voice of the Chargers. He knows what he's talking about. The 6th pick is where things are really interesting. JJ McCarthy did an interview with Rich Eisen where he said, you know, the Giants he spent the most time with them out of any team. And so are the Giants really going to take a quarterback? If they don't, if the Giants don't take a quarterback, they take a receiver at 6, the Titans sitting at 7, how could they pass on Joe Alt with the current state of their roster? And we know how important a left tackle is, as Brian Callahan coming over watched Joe Burrow get destroyed in the Super Bowl and get multiple season-ending injuries there in Cincinnati. So I think, to me, if you get to the 8th pick and JJ McCarthy is still on the board, that relationship between Sean Payton and Terry Fontenot comes into play. I know the Vikings can offer more, but look, when you worked with somebody for 20 years, let's say you and I do this podcast for 20 years, Cody, and if I call you up for a favor after 20 years and I'm like, look, man, I need your help on this. And you're like, hey, sorry, somebody else is offering me a little bit more in return for this favor. I don't know. I don't know how these guys are wired, but I'm just saying, I think that relationship could come into play if JJ is the Broncos' #1 target.
Well, see, Broncos Country, where are you leaning for tonight's NFL draft? The Broncos on the clock at 12th overall, at least as of now, in terms of how we know it. But that could change. They could trade up. They could trade back. We'll find out tonight where the future is for the Denver Broncos after the NFL draft. Expect an episode of Locked On Broncos after the pick, after some of the stuff has gone on. I'll be in Dove Valley at the Broncos team facility where you can check in with Sayre and myself as everything happens. It's going to be a wild ride. So Broncos Country, buckle up. We'll see you then for another episode, Locked On Broncos.